Clearing the air on air pollution. Canada, the cleaner than the environmentalists want you to believe. Much cleaner. Folks, breathe in the cold, crisp, clean Canadian air. For more on our pollution priorities, we turn to Tom Harris from the International Climate Science Coalition. Tom, are you breathing a sigh of relief tonight?
Well, very nice air here in Ottawa. I mean, you know, obviously there's always things to work on in the environment, but we've had better air quality constantly throughout the last few decades in Canada. The Fraser Report, while it comes from, you know, a think tank, actually took its original data from Environment Canada. So anybody who wants, they can go check Environment Canada's website, and they have lots of references in the Fraser Report where you can see that indeed pollution across Canada, air pollution especially, is dropping continuously.
Tom, were you watching some of that Suzuki stuff?
Oh, yeah.
The Soviets made propaganda like that. I mean, Canada just looked like, well, I was going to say Canada looked like hell. Canada looked like Beijing. I mean, I'm not even sure that was Canada, but I mean, obviously they use the filters, they use the tricks of the trade, and that's the whole point.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. One of Canada's astronauts, Bjarne Trygvarsson, met with us a few years ago, and he said when he was going around the Earth, because he of course went in orbit, he said when you're over places like China and India, on even clear days, you frequently can't see the ground. He says when you go over North America, Canada, the United States, he said it's the cleanest part of the populated world. And he sees this regularly every orbit. So he said, you know, the idea that we're somehow destroying the planet, he says, it's not viewed, astronauts don't see that. And of course, the statistics don't lie. The fact is, every air pollutant has been dropping since the 1970s, right on Environment Canada's website.
Tom, here's what many people who are watching this show, Citizens of Edmonton Nation, wonder about. You know, they see David the Menzoid Menzies on our show last night confronting some of these environmental guys. I mean, once again, I'll try to be relatively generous about it. They're marginal.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not scientists. They probably have their hearts in the right place, or I don't know, someone's paying them $10 to stand there with a sign. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's hard to believe that crowd would have any impact on real scientists at our regulatory authorities. Now, you're in Ottawa. You're in the belly of the beast. I mean, are you telling me that people in our various government departments take those guys with the signs and the guys putting the filters over the cameras to make Toronto look like Beijing, that those guys are taking these guys seriously?
Well, no, the real scientists that are in Environment Canada and the Ministry of Natural Resources for Ontario, they look at the data and they know what's really happening. But so often the PR spin doctors that write the minister's speeches or put out press releases have to somehow fit in with political correctness. And if Suzuki's saying, you know, people are dying in Toronto and Greenpeace is saying the same thing because of air pollution, the fact that studies that have been done recently show that the number of deaths you can attribute to air pollution in Toronto is a big fat zero. Okay, a zero. If you go to Ross McKittrick's website from the University of Guelph, he has an article called Toronto Pollution Deaths Zero. And he shows a study from the UK who happily chose Toronto as their target city to assess how many people really have their deaths attributed to air pollution. And they found they couldn't attribute any to air pollution, that it was more attributable to weather and, you know, public sanitation, all sorts of other things. But the actual statistical numbers showed a big zero.
All right, so let's examine what's most important here. We hear this every day. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about immigration, and in this case we're talking about environment. We're constantly hearing this, well, you can't say this and you can't say that because you got to be politically correct, because you got to humor the guys carrying the signs in front of the hotel where Menzoid was confronting them, essentially to do comedy. It was a comedy act. That's what they're doing for him. They're providing him with comedy. So here's what I don't understand. Why do we feel that we have to bend over backwards to appease people who we really don't have any respect for?
Well, and also, many of the Greens don't even know what the data is. You know, during the election where Dalton McGuinty first became Premier of Ontario, they had an all-candidates meeting here in Ottawa, and I went to it, and the Liberals were saying, time for a change, you know, air pollution, we have to change the approach. And I went to the mic afterwards and I said, why would you want to change the approach? It's working very well. And I held up a pile of data sheets to say, you know, this is the data. And after the presentation, of course, the politicians weren't interested because they were just looking for sound bites. But after the presentation and was over, a whole lot of Green Party people came up to me and said, let's see those sheets. So I laid them out across the table. And they were amazed. They looked at the sheets. They said, yeah, we didn't know this. And I thought, the Green Party doesn't know what the pollution levels are. So I said, can we take these sheets with us? I said, yeah, sure, take them away. And that's the real problem, is that the people who are campaigning on these various issues don't just look at the basic data.
It must be very difficult. I mean, you're a trained engineer. You were an aerospace engineer. You can't keep an airplane in the sky on ideology.
That's
you
right.
actually have to know what you're doing.
Yeah,
so it must be very difficult for you and many people like you to live in a country that you love very much, the cleanest country on the planet, and to hear all this ideology, and then, of course, to say, well, I guess some people in government have to be nice to these guys.
Yeah, and especially it's hard because there are really important public works projects that are being neglected because so much money is going into bogus concerns. I mean, for example, we should have separate sewers and water runoff. Right now in most cities it's combined, and we pollute a lot of our rivers in that sense. Even though water quality in Canada in general is improving, there are definitely areas that we can improve. We should reduce agricultural runoff, into rivers and lakes. Victoria, it's a good example of a city that's throwing its sewage directly into the ocean. It really annoys the Americans. So there definitely are areas that we should be working on. Toxic waste dumps. The Auditor General said we should spend billions to clean that up. So there definitely are areas we should focus on, even though there's a general uplifting of all these areas. We're improving. But we're wasting it, unfortunately, on ridiculous things like trying to stop climate change or reduce air pollution, when, in fact, the current approach to air pollution reduction is very, very good.
Tom Harris, thank you so much for the visit. Appreciate it. You are a breath of fresh air, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Harris in the nation's capital.